How did you first stumble across Hiyori's story?
Well, I'd like to say like I was caught in a snowstorm in Japan and I had to run to safety and go in, and then I just found her in this like mystical sumo dojo. But I actually just kind of Googled her.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, found her that way.
So why did you decide to Google female sumo wrestlers?
I used to like it. I used to be on Channel 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I used to watch it when it was on there, and it always struck me that like I came from like an all-female household, and I always thought like there's a massive lack of women in the sport, and just didn't realize. I just kind of, but I think being a filmmaker, you're always a bit nosy and curious, and so yeah, just kind of just to see what the situation was, and I was really surprised when I found out. I hadn't realized that they're actually kind of like forbidden from entering in the professional rings, which is the case.
Can you explain that a bit more? Because it is tradition in Japan that is it 21 women can't wrestle anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they are they're just not allowed to compete at a professional level, and so they're not allowed to enter the ring. It's seen as a sacred space, and so when if a woman touches the ring or goes inside it, then she contaminates the sacred space. And so to do that, they've just like, they didn't used to allow women to watch sumo either, but they're now allowed to watch sumo wrestling. And then they introduced it that they can now at an amateur level they can compete. And so professional is still a sacred space where they can't enter, but the men then go on to become professional at 21, and then the women are forced to retire because there's no kind of professional outlet for them.
And what's the general feeling of that amongst women in Japan?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. There's a great respect for tradition, and often rightly so. And so I feel, especially in Japan, it's quite a society that reveres kind of tradition and also, I guess, history. And so they like to kind of maintain that. And I think that often they feel that if they start kind of allowing women to compete in the professional sense, and if that changes, then they're not sure. The people that kind of are supporting the ruling of them not allowed, they think that lots of other changes will kind of occur, and they're not quite sure about that. I feel like there is a lot of support for women to be allowed to compete professionally and be inside the ring, and but yeah, there's also the other school where people think that it would kind of change things too much.
How much of a life has Hiyori dedicated to sumo?
Well, that's what really drew me to Hiyori when I first met her. So she's incredibly passionate about the sport. She's been competing since she was 7, and at that age you compete kind of against the boys. Yeah. As she mentioned in the trailer, she used to beat the boys as well, and she's undefeated for the first few years. Yeah. And then they kind of separate them when they go into secondary school. But I feel, it's a huge part of her life, and I found it interesting how people can dedicate that much time to it. She trains 6 times a week, like 3 or 4 hours a day. Yet there's this kind of glass ceiling where she knows she'll never be able to kind of achieve the kind of epitome of the sport.
How does she feel about that? I mean, it's like, doing this since she was 7 years old, dedicating so much of her life to it, and knowing there's an expiration date on it. Like, how does she feel?
Well, you have to watch the film.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. So how did you contact Hiyori then?
So there's her university, Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, is the only sumo club where men and women train alongside. Okay. So I thought that was seemed very progressive compared to other ones where it's kind of segregated. And I contacted them, and they had 3 female sumo wrestlers at the time, and Hiyori studying gender studies. And she also is from a little small village in the mountains, which you kind of see her jog down at one point. And so I just thought that those 2 things just drew me towards her. I thought she might have had maybe a greater sense of the awareness of the differences in the sexes with sumo because of her gender studies, and then also the kind of the beautiful place she's from, and knowing that she was a village girl, as she calls herself, going to a big city. Thought it was an interesting dynamic as well. And
what was her reaction when you told her you wanted to make a film about her and this sort of, I mean, it's not something I've ever heard of, like this gender divide in sumo wrestling?
Yeah, no, everyone I think they just all thought I was just this crazy guy, and they didn't really take me seriously. So she's like, yeah, you can if you want. And I was doing this filming with her, and it was great. We had the opportunity to fly over for the premiere, which is in London Film Festival.
Oh, brilliant!
And that was like sold out in Empire, Leicester Square, like over 700 people. So it's quite a big screening, and I was shooting and directing, so it's often just me and the producer, local producer, and then sometimes our producer Andrew Carver from the UK as well.
Yeah.
And so there's at maximum there's like 3 of us around, normally just 2, and I was just kind of running around doing loads of stuff. So she just thought I was this crazy guy, and I think because I went a few times and she hadn't seen anything, I didn't show her any of the footage as we were going along the process, and so I think she just kind of thought that I was just a deluded person saying, yes, it's going to be in a cinema one day. So it was great to be able to fly her over and for her to see it.
What was her reaction to it?
Thankfully she really liked it. She cried when she watched it. She cried every time she's seen it, actually. She's seen it about 6 times and she's cried every time, which makes me kind of blink back the tears as well.
It's such a strange thing. Like, I don't really understand how. You used to watch it on Channel 4.
Yes, yeah.
And they showed sumo wrestling on Channel 4. It's just a bizarre thing, because like you say, some of the, at an amateur level, they let women compete, but it's a sacred space. And then a profession, I don't get it. I'm going to have to watch the documentary, obviously. Was there a language barrier between you and Hiyori?
Unfortunately, I'm not fluent in Japanese, so there was a language barrier. And also, I guess traditionally, just the way Japanese people express themselves is quite different, and so even shooting in other languages, you can kind of gauge quite a lot through body language, and I found that even trickier than I normally would in, say, a different European language, for example. And so I had a wonderful local kind of translator, fixer person that kind of was my translation, my everything that in terms of questions and kind of letting me know what was going on was through her. We used to have like a little code, so when I was filming like observational filming, and I had no idea, I knew sometimes what they were talking about because I picked up some of the words, but then generally I'd have no idea if they're talking about like hanging up their laundry, or if they're talking about like some really profound thing to do sumo. So I used to have to kind of get her to whisper to me like what they're talking about as we were filming often.
Were there any other clashes of culture while you were filming the documentary?
I wouldn't say clashes. I guess it's just quite a different culture, and so I'm not very organised often, which traditionally or generally I found that they're very organised, the Japanese people I met, and so in terms of getting like paperwork to them on time and kind of questions which they like to kind of have prepared, I'd say that's maybe a personal thing for me, that I wasn't really on top of that, which is a bit frustrating for some of them. Yeah. Right.
Okay. And is this your first documentary then?
No, it's not. I guess it's the first one of this level.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was it a difficult shoot, or was it particularly easy?
Yeah, no, lots of challenges.
Filmed over a number of years, it looks like, so.
Yeah, no, a couple shoots, and the language is obviously tricky. And in her hometown of Aomori, it's like the second most northerly state in Japan. And it was like minus 15 degrees when I was there, and like thick snow, like 2 meters of snow. And it was just me and the fixer. So and also Hiyori, she's great, and she's very natural in front of camera, which is a lovely thing. Yeah. But on the downside, she didn't want to kind of repeat or do anything again. So if I missed something, I was like, oh, could you just maybe walk through that door again? And she's like, no, I've done it now. Why do it again? Which is great to get the kind of the natural reaction, but then it is often tricky for me just being by myself, having to capture everything. So that was a bit, especially the snow run scene. Yeah. I was having to like run ahead, film a go past, and then she wouldn't wait till I go, so I just had to kind of like run ahead again and do that. So little things like that was tricky, and just how cold it was freezing. So the batteries only lasted like 30 minutes instead of like an hour and a half of what they normally would last. So that was tricky, and the drone was the worst thing. So I had a drone with me, and then that just kind of refused to fly because it was too cold. So I had to I actually slept with it in my bed the night before, and then like rushed out and did 2 drone shots, which are both in the film, all of it, and then it kind of crashed because it got too cold. So I had to kind of go through this rice paddy field which is literally like snow up to there and wade through to get it back, which I found eventually.
Well, thank God. You don't want to lose the drone you're sleeping with. Was there any, as you're making the film, obviously you're making a documentary, you're going to have to be reactive. Did the film change along the way?
Yeah, I guess for Hyori, as we were filming with her, she kind of took the sport and her personal kind of development more seriously through the course of as we were filming, and so that kind of fluctuated into her wanting to then win the world championships and be the best in the world. And initially it was more about the situation of and the environment for female sumo wrestlers. So the film evolved to have that as a backdrop, but then also be about kind of this amazing young woman trying to kind of achieve her dreams.
And when she got to the world championships, how did she feel? I mean, again, it's going to be a watch the documentary answer, isn't it? But how did she feel?
Yeah, I guess it's come a long way in that I think they've had nearly 20 years of women competing, so it's still a relatively new sport. And now there's 21 countries that compete.
Oh wow!
And yeah, I think she found it quite an inspiring place. She's also very nervous because she kind of geared up to this moment, and then because I was there and we'd kind of flown over for it, I feel like that she took it more seriously, which is great. But then on the flip side, it made her like a bit more nervous as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And when you were making the documentary, did you ever talk to people about the potential for advocacy, you know, for making it so that women can compete in a professional level? Was there anything like that involved?
Yeah, I guess for all my documentaries, I like to do things that kind of revolve around the social issues and hopefully generate awareness or help create kind of some sort of social change. And yeah, that was the same for this one. So it was something that I was saying, hopefully it could have a positive impact, just not only for her on a personal level, but for the wider sport.
And were there any documentaries that influenced the way you made this or inspired you?
Oh, I guess get inspiration from lots of different things and films. In terms of with documentary, there's a director called Matthew Heineman. He directed Cartel Land and City of Ghosts. He's an American guy, but both of those films, the first Cartel Land was in Mexico, and the second was in various parts of the Middle East. And so he didn't speak Arabic or Spanish, which I found, and he's also kind of self-shooting, and so I drew like parallels, and I like both of those films, and so I guess I was quite inspired by him and what he could achieve through the language barriers, as we're mentioning. One of my favourite documentaries is The Act of Killing by Joshua Oppenheimer, and that's got quite a cinematic aesthetic, and I try to also emulate having the story kind of come across, and for me that's, I guess, the most important, but then also to have some beautiful imagery if I can.
Was it easy for you to find the story at the heart of the documentary? Because I know for some people, they meet an interesting subject and they're like, I want to tell that story, but it's not immediately clear what that story is. Yeah,
no, I found that really tricky, and I guess the other documentaries I've made have been kind of a shorter process, and so the fact that it was kind of over this long period of time, it meant that she was kind of maturing and changing, and obviously what she wanted to achieve was changing, and so it's a challenge to kind of try and maintain I guess what I wanted to tell at the heart of that, but then also keep it true to the events and what's happening and to how she's feeling. And so thankfully she didn't, it wasn't like, say, she was really passionate about women's issues and then kind of just completely changed. That would have been a bit of an issue. So thankfully she just got more motivated for kind of helping to try and inspire, and hopefully the documentary can help with that as well.
I asked this question to an earlier documentary maker as well, because it sounds like you were very interested in Hyori and her story. As a documentarian and a filmmaker, is it difficult sometimes to maintain a level of distance from the subject, especially on a documentary like this, where you're making about one specific person?
Yeah, I feel like, in terms of, as the tricky thing I found was not to kind of, we're spending lots of time together, and I didn't want to I obviously had hopes for a documentary, but I didn't want to kind of overpromise things.
Yeah.
And so I felt like because you spend that much time with someone, both shooting and not, you kind of get very close to them and care about them as obviously for your documentary, but more so for them as people. And so like in the World Championships, I was like really nervous and filming like kind of forgetting sometimes that I was actually had a job to do and kind of wanting to cheer her along, but I was there obviously with the camera. And the average sumo match lasts 7 seconds, so it's an incredibly quick process. And so you've got to make sure like you're right there ready to shoot when it comes to crunch time, which you can't be. So yeah, all the different things you're worried about with the story, but then also just technically with the camera, that's quite challenging in itself.
Well, is that when you're balancing both being the director and working out what you want to shoot, and you're being the cameraman at the same time? I can imagine, it would get quite difficult, especially if the match lasts 7 seconds.
Exactly, yeah. And Hyori's #1 fan, so that's the biggest role, really.
And holding your banner up, Hyori #1.
Yeah.
If you had an unlimited budget and could do literally anything with the film, what would you do?
Wow, I feel like we achieved quite a lot on the budget that we had.
Yeah.
It'd have been great I feel like filmmaking is obviously a really collaborative process, and I like to get as many people involved as I can, and hopefully they can all kind of share the vision and take ownership as well of the film. So I feel like it'd have been great to be able to pay everyone more than I did. That'd have been a good start. In terms of with the actual film, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I feel like we were able to, with the modest budget, kind of hit quite high production levels with just the kit we used and the people we got on board, and everyone kind of believed in the project, which was very pleasing, and feel very kind of indebted to everyone in the process. But they all kind of took a massive hit and a massive pay cut. So I guess to do that would be great. Hopefully we'll be able to get some social impact money, and that can then help with the film's distribution. So if we don't, then I'd kind of say to try and help spread the film, and the educational aspects I feel is important for me to add to that.
That's the most responsible answer I think I've ever had. I'd pay the crew, and I'd work more on the advertising. In terms of, you mentioned it screened in London. What was the reaction there?
It's all a bit overwhelming. It was 725 people, so not a small screening. And there was like a few 7 or 8 shorts, and they got a really great reaction, which was very happy about. I guess so it couldn't really have gone better. And Hyori cried. So what more can you ask for?
And now you've come home to Manchester. What are you hoping for the reaction to be tonight?
Standing ovation this time. I feel like that's the only other level we can get to. But I guess it's lovely to be back in Manchester. Made several films, but it's my first screening, Manchester screening, and so very looking forward to it. Very excited.
Excellent. And if you could give any advice to any I'll start again. If you could give any advice to filmmakers looking to get started in the industry, what would it be?
Wow, I guess, it's tricky. I feel like there's lots of demands in the industry, and too many people have to work for free or for not very much money, and that's often tricky, especially if you've not got kind of a support network or system in place. And so that can be very disheartening for people. So I just kind of try and urge people to try and continue at it. I think perseverance is the main thing, and just to have a passion and to kind of follow your goal, and to keep to maintain that level of passion and enthusiasm if you can. And it is definitely a very tricky industry, especially because of those factors and the long hours and unsociable times and the amount of people doing it. And there's a lot of things to kind of that can potentially be disheartening, but I guess you've got to see the hope in the face of adversity and just keep on cracking on.
I like that answer, Matt. Thank you very much.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you.